Hello, and welcome to today's Coppice dev stream, where we are going to be working on the last few bits of Coppice before release. Today, we're actually not going to be doing too much code. It's going to be a lot of writing documentation, updating the manual, updating the press kit, updating sample documents in the app, and updating the website. So we're going to see how much of that we can get through today, and basically show you the tail end of building an app, of doing the software development process. Hey Sinister, how are you doing today? Hope you are having a good Saturday so far. But yes, if we head straight over to our main screen, we're going to be starting off by working on the manual. And at the end of last session, we implemented this where we went through and saw what exactly we need to update in the manual. So today we're going to update those specific things and get new sections written and show you basically roughly how the content management system works. Now there will be a fair amount of me doing some stuff off screen and bringing it on for this, because the content management system also handles other things which I don't want to show because it can contain user data. So that is what we're going to be working on today. I am doing pretty good actually. Woke up fairly early this morning, so I'm probably going to be fairly tired tonight, but managed to get quite a bit done this morning. And after I had almost completed my office setup, I decided to spend more money on my office setup this morning, because I realised somehow, after years and years of working like this, there is a lot of desk space that I cannot use because I have monitor stands on it. So I've ended up buying myself a monitor arm to try out. Had a few people recommend it to me, so I'm going to try this monitor arm out, and at the very least on my new setup I'll have my main monitor on the monitor arm rather than a stand. But maybe all of them will be, and I'll suddenly get a load of disk space back. So we'll see how that goes. I also, after the evening stream on Wednesday, did a bit of hacking. And this is something inspired by you, Sinister. So you were saying, what about when I'm muted, can I have some sort of icon that appears? And I can. Now, the simple way to do this would be to set up a multi-action in the Stream Deck so that when I mute, it will actually show an icon. The problem there is I have multiple things that mute, and also I then lose the icon on my Stream Deck that's flashing at me telling me I'm muted. So what I realized is that OBS actually has scripting. So you bring this up and you have scripts, and if I edit this script, don't want to that or that, but if I open this script, this is a script that is going to tie the visibility of something to the mic. So when I mute the mic, it's going to show something. Now, it's not going to show it straight away. Instead, it's going to wait 5 seconds. Because often I need to mute quickly just because I'm about to cough or something, or I'm clearing my throat, and I don't want that to come through. So I don't want it to show up muting all the time. So if I just mute temporarily and clear my throat, you see, nothing has happened. But if I mute and wait for 5 seconds, So you could see that my character was flashing because I'm speaking, but I was muted. So now I can do the quick things where I clear my throat. And it doesn't show up. If I'm muted for a prolonged period of time, it'll actually show up saying I'm muted so that you can know that I'm muted. So it's another visual thing for me to see when I'm glancing over on top of what is on the Stream Deck. Someone actually, I got some of the inspiration for this. Someone's done a script where it actually communicates with like a flashing LED that they have put on the side of their monitor, so it will flash this LED at them when they're muted, which I think is a cool idea, but I don't need it as much, and it's just one of those things that I've seen other streamers have a mute icon up, but they generally do it manually, or they do it through other means, and just having this script that does it for me seems to work pretty great. There are still a few issues with it. When I start up OBS, it doesn't always pick up the outputs, so I have to refresh, but it should help the situations where I'm muted. So that's just a little something that I've played around with. I mean, I want to do some other things at some point. Play around with updating other aspects, adding a bit more motion to some aspects of the overlay, some better transitions, but it's a question of how much time I put into that versus how much time do I put into, for example, learning Blender and Unity and so on, and building a 3D environment. So yes, it does open the door to a lot of things, just realizing you can script, because you can get events when things happen. You can change properties on any sources, you can add sources and scenes and all sorts of stuff. So it is pretty powerful what you can do. People do all sorts of things. So you can do like the countdown timer that I have, that is currently using Stream Elements. And what you can do is actually create a script that just adds a timer using like a text source and just updates that as a countdown inside OBS. So, hi, Wasabi Cheetah, how are you doing today? There's Coternius who gives his 3D assets. Oh, interesting. I mean, in terms of the 3D stuff, it's one of those things that I used to do a lot of 3D in the past, like when I was in school. I just haven't touched a 3D program like properly in like 10-15 years, I think. So it's needing to relearn how to do that stuff. So how my character would look in 3D, I do have an idea. So essentially what it would be is like the body is just round, so that's fairly simple. You just make the cross section, rotate it round, you've got the body shape. A wheel on the bottom. I don't know how the arms would work or anything, I'd have to work that bit out. But then it is effectively just a monitor head. I haven't decided. Part of me wants to make it just like a CRT monitor, so it's quite deep. Part of me wants to make it just a flat panel. I mean, the best example is, of course, one of the best computers ever made. which is of course the iMac G4. So that's potentially what I'd be thinking of in 3D. So if you sort of imagine this bottom bit is sort of flattened off at the top, extended down, stick a wheel on the bottom and stick some holes for the arms and various other tools and stuff to come out of. Something kind of similar to that is probably what I'd be looking at for 3D. But that's essentially what I'm thinking. I mean, it's stuff like thinking about what the environment would be that I'd be in and so on. So it's stuff that is sort of ruminating in the back of my mind because I've got various other things that I want to do first, and I'd need to learn. I need to learn how to use like Blender and so on, and I've dabbled in Unity before, so I have like rough ideas of how to use it, but how to build up all the stuff that many streamers have got where it integrates with Twitch and everything would take a bit more. But I mean, hopefully down the line that will be stuff that I can work on the Wednesday streams, and I may do like weekend streams as well where I just work on the stream for a while and do stuff like that, because I always find those sorts of things fun to watch and they're also fun to do, so it would be nice to work on that sometime. You touch the Mac once, never again. What are you on, Windows or Linux, Wasabi? Where? Oh, you're on Linux now? Oh, so you've been on what, about 18 months then, so how are you finding it, living the Linux life? Right, so let's have a look again and just refresh ourselves on what needs updating. Where have I gonna put Jira? There. So, creating a document and open close document, we need to update the version. I think I may have a Photoshop file with this in so that I can update that, so I don't have to take that full screenshot every single time. So we'll do that. Set image of an image page. That is doing. We need rotating, cropping, and then updating all of the sections on links and the section on searching. So let's update this. We'll add these back in later, but we're just going to focus on the manual for now. So want to update versions. Set image of image page. Rotating. Add. Rotate. Up pages. Update linking section. Add searching. Let's see, you like it. A lot of the programs you use are on Linux as well. It's like Windows 10 with the functionality of Windows 7. Yeah, the big problem for me with Linux, and Windows for that matter, is a lot of the tools I use are not on it. Now, that's kind of obvious considering my job is writing Mac and iOS software, but it's also a lot of the other apps and so on I use. Some of them are on Windows, but a lot of them are Mac only. And that's kind of what keeps me on the Mac more than anything, is all the third-party software that is Mac only, and the fact that it's my job. So there's a lot of stuff there, but I mean, Linux is certainly a lot better than it was. I've tried it a few times. Ages ago, I had a dual boot with Ubuntu. Oh, you don't even understand what Linux is, Sensei. Okay, so Linux, if you imagine there are basically 3 core operating systems. There are many, many, many more, but there are 3 core ones. You've got Windows, you've got Unix, and you've got Linux. And Linux is sort of a re-implementation of Unix with various other bits and pieces on. Now, Windows, like what these 3 are, is they are effectively like as Wasabi says, the base system. So they are what is referred to as the kernel, and then you get other things on top, so all of your base infrastructure. So Windows, you have the NT kernel, which was introduced in Windows NT, and that powers all versions of Windows and Windows Server and so on. Then you have the Unix kernel, which was made in the 70s. Actually, it would be 1970, because that's when time began in terms of computers. And Unix powers a lot of different things. It was very powerful in terms of server side of things. You get a lot of storage stuff can be built on Unix, and Mac OS is built on top of Unix. It's built on a variant of Unix. Apple has their own variant of it. And then you have Linux, which, like I say, is Unix but not Unix. It's like a re-implementation. You can't really say it's an open source implementation of Unix, because there are many open source implementations of Unix, but it's not Unix. But Linux powers like the vast majority of the server side. So all of my web servers, like my web server, I'm pretty sure is probably running Linux. Most stuff runs Linux. I believe the PlayStation and possibly the Switch run Linux. Android phones Android is Linux. In terms of like consumer stuff, like what people actually use and interact with, Android is like the biggest Linux, they're called distributions. So Android is effectively the biggest Linux distro in terms of like people actually using a computer, like having a computer that has it on. But most of the internet is powered by Linux. So all it really is another foundation of the OS. So Linux has various different versions, like Unix does, and Windows has had different versions. You've got server and not, and so on. But Linux has different versions, which usually add mostly the UI side on top of it. There are some like lower level things that they'll tweak, where some will focus on getting better features in certain things. Some will focus on being better for server deployments, some will focus on being better for media, and so on. So yeah, Linux is used all over the place. I mean, Linux is probably running on TVs, it's running on cars, but similarly Unix is. And when it gets to servers and stuff, you get Windows on a lot of stuff, you get Linux, you get Unix. So there are lots of different things, but you can really think of it as just being those three basic cores of Windows, Unix, and Linux. And like I say, Unix and Linux, if you know how to use, like when it comes to like using like the command line and stuff like that, if you know how to use Unix, you can get around pretty well on Linux, because a lot of stuff is compatible and ports over and stuff. This is why the Mac has become so popular for development, because when Apple switched to Unix with macOS 10, an awful lot of like Unix and a lot of Linux stuff and a lot of existing Unix stuff was a lot easier to port over to the Mac, in terms of like the low level stuff. The high level like applications like UI stuff couldn't really be ported over as easy, but lower level stuff could be ported over a lot easy. It's a lot easier to support both Mac and Linux because Mac is Unix and there's a lot of similarities. They're not identical. There's enough distinction there that you can't just take something that's a Unix thing and run it on Linux, but they're close enough that you can transfer it a lot more easily than say going to Windows. Whereas if you're at the higher level, like the UI level, there's a bit more distinction between them. You can get versions of Linux that work very similar to the Mac in terms of like the UI level, some that work very similar to Windows, and some that work completely differently. So yeah. Hi Uli, how are you doing today? How's your weekend going? Yeah, most of the Wi-Fi routers using Linux or BSD. I mean, you find Linux or BSD. BSD, by the way, this is basically Unix, essentially. There are different brands of Unix, but BSD is the most popular open source, and macOS is based off BSD. But yeah, I mean, looking at it, won't surprise me. My printer has Linux running on it to some degree. So there's, like I say, most electronic stuff, if it needs something more than the absolute basic operating system, Linux, it's going to probably be Linux or BSD running on it. And like I say, Linux and BSD between them, with like Windows thrown in, it's like Windows is a significant minority, but Linux and BSD make up the most, like the bulk of the server space. So when they talk about the cloud, most of that is Linux or BSD. Let's see. Back when you ported from Unix, usually based on any existing OpenBSD or FreeBSD port, or like in that the generic Linux version. Yeah, so it's all very similar. So, like I said, at the low level, it's a lot easier transferring from Mac to Linux and back than going to Windows. So Windows now has it's not just PowerShell, it's PowerShell something. Is it PowerShell with Linux subsystem or something like that? So you can effectively like treat it as Linux on Windows now. So it's becoming unified in that respect. It's the, ironically, Microsoft is the odd one out. I mean, another way of thinking about it, Sinister, is web browsers. You have the browser rendering engine, but then you have the web browser itself. So you have like WebKit. I know a lot of things that use WebKit. You have the Chromium engine, which is based off of WebKit, which powers Chrome, but also powers Microsoft Edge and various others. Then you have Firefox, which has its own rendering engine and so on. So it's a similar thing where you've got lots of different back-end, lots of different rendering engines on the browser, but there are multiple browsers that sit on top of it. And similarly, you've got different kernels or core operating systems and so on, but then you have multiple different UI implementations that sit on top of it. Because, to be completely honest, writing an operating system is hard. Writing an operating system that is efficient and secure is even harder. So that is why you do not have many of them, and that is why when most people want to build an operating system, as it were, they don't build it from scratch. They go and they take Linux or they take BSD and they build on top of it. So it's better to work on top of what other people have done and tested and know works well and know is performant, and build on top of that rather than start from scratch. If you're starting from scratch, you really need to know what you're doing. And usually the people starting from scratch are the people that are writing stuff like software for rockets or nuclear power stations or stuff like that, where you need requirements that Linux, Windows and Unix cannot really satisfy. You need to start from scratch, but they're usually a lot more critical infrastructure projects. Right. So the first thing we want to do is update our versions. Yeah, stuff like braking systems in cars, stuff like that, that is where you can like make changes to things like Linux and Unix and so on, but they're more extreme, and depending on the complexity and what you need, you generally want something lower level. I mean, I believe one of the gold standards in terms of like something written completely from, essentially from scratch, that isn't using Linux or Unix or Windows or anything like that. Most because half of them didn't exist, but the software for the space shuttle was all completely done from scratch because it needs to work in a way where you have, I believe it's like 4 computers, and you need 3 of the computers to agree to get it to do something, but you also have another backup computer on top of that, so it's dealing with a lot of real-time stuff, a lot of redundancy, a lot of complexity like that. But the thing is, they were so meticulous with that I think they only had, through the entire lifetime of the Space Shuttle program, I think it was 1 software bug in flight, which is, for something as complex as that, is incredibly impressive software engineering. That is when the term software engineering really applies. Right, so I want to open up Finder, MQ Dapps, Coppice, Design. I need to tidy this up at some point, because I've got design, I've got artwork, and there is not really a proper distinction between the two. There we go. In the help book section. So what build is this probably going to be? What build are we on now? It's still 920. So this is probably going to be build 21. And that needs... creating a document welcome 1, 2. Oh, 22, 1. So bring up topic images. I swear this used to not be this awkward to resize a column. There we go. Create a document. 2, 1. I will check that because we also want it to be right, so that bit is done. We'll be able to update that. So is where are we? Yeah, just Coppice.
Synthesis complete.
I hope my Mac Studio arrives before it gets too warm out. It's only about 15 degrees outside today, but the amount of heat that my computer is putting out at the moment, running apps and doing OBS encoding and stuff like that, it is making the room rather warm, and I could do with something that works a bit cooler. Right. upload. So let's upload those. Okay, now those are updated. I am going to put that on. You can see part of my back end. So, what I am going to is it's creating a document, an open close document. So I go into here and I have this document I've built where you have the title, the tags, stuff like this. You have a summary, and then you fill in all the details you want, and then down here you have all of your preview of it. So what I'm going to do is this wants to be creating a document welcome 2022 1. And because I've uploaded it to the server, it now appears there. So we'll just copy that and we'll update. And then if I go back to support, you'll see that there's this publish changes. So this hasn't actually gone live on the website. What I will end up doing is when I ship the app, I'll just go through and click publish changes on everything. So it doesn't actually, you basically have two versions. You have the last edited version and you have the published version, which lets me basically do this by hand. So update. I've also added a bunch of stuff down here that automatically adds a bunch of common things, and something that's really cool if you're ever doing HTML, HTML5 added the details section. So this entire thing here where I've got these sections that are collapsible, that is literally just details. You have a summary, which is what's always visible, and then you have the rest, and there's no JavaScript or anything needed, and it's supported on all the major browsers, and it's looking through like all the stuff that was added in HTML5. There is so much stuff that eliminates the need for so much JavaScript, but a lot of people forget that it's there. So make sure that's updated, go back. So got that. So now we need to update, set the image of an image page. Image page can contain a single image, can be all those things. Start editing the image page. Sure you are on the what do I actually call it? Sure you are in image mode, and what we want for that is first off to change the appearance to light, and we're going to want to take a shot of that, a shot of that, screenshot of that, copy Coppice logo. I want to take a screenshot of that, and then ooh. That is what we call a bug. They are not templates. Right. Oh. Let's fix that then. Oh, I bet I know what it is. Am I not? If I'm rendering them as templates first. Okay, so they are being rendered as templates. So therefore, hold. Anti-scroll. Segmented cell. Oh, they are rendering as templates. But we always want it to be black, so we don't want them to actually die. If I change that, that is what they're doing, but what we want to do is I think we need code. And what we are going to do is load not hotspot type segment control dot appearance. No, dark aqua. So hopefully that should force it always to have this one control always be in dark mode. So that's correct, but if we change light, and it stays correct. Okay, that's that fix. Right, let's check on tracks. I realize I haven't looked in the back. We should network enabled TV tuners as previous job that would basically just small Linux PCs. The only thing that was something else was Bluetooth enabled light bulbs, which basically had to have a real operating system. Just a small Bluetooth library. It would not surprise me if there are light bulbs out there, smart light bulbs that are running a full operating system. But yeah, you even had to write your own version of malloc. Can't see that being a lot of fun to do correctly. Just came back. What is malloc? Malloc is basically allocating memory. It's memory allocate. So when you're doing C programming, you need to manually allocate memory in RAM, do stuff with that memory, and then release it afterwards. So most programming languages, they handle that for you through either garbage collection or reference counting or stuff like that. But with C, C++, so on, you have to manually allocate. And normally, like all the Unix stuff has it there, but yeah, so ref counting is sort of a level on top. So when you, like, Objective-C has ref counting. I mean, technically Swift is a ref counted language. I believe Rust is as well. I mean, technically most languages are reference counted in some way or another. The difference is that what a language like Swift or Objective-C, if you have automated reference counting on, does is the compiler inserts like the retains and releases that increment and decrement ref count, whereas garbage collection is a separate thing running that periodically goes through the memory graph and cleans things up. So the benefit of garbage collection is that it's a lot harder to over-release or to have memory. It's not really that much harder to have memory leaks because you can still have return cycles, but it's a bit easier in many regards. But it has performance hits, whereas automated reference counting has fewer performance hits, but it does have additional complexity in terms of the compiler, and the compiler can end up doing a bit more stuff, so it's all trade-offs. But when you get down to C, you don't even get reference counting. You literally have to do it all yourself. Yeah, as Uli says, malloc's just reserving space in RAM for an object. You're allocating that RAM, you're not putting anything in there. So you would malloc some RAM, and then you would load some data from disk or from the network, or put a string in there, or some sort of buffer or something. But of course the problem there is there's no protections or checks on it, so that's where you get things like buffer overflows and stuff like that, where you are what you're initializing is bigger than what you have allocated, so therefore it goes into other parts of the memory. So yeah. It is somewhat tedious. I mean, funnily enough, oh no, that is just maybe, I don't think it is necessarily reference counting. So every time like in this script that I wrote for OBS in Lua, because it's talking to the C API, so I get the sources, and that basically gives me the sources info that I then have to release. Here, when I get the old source by name for the audio source, then I have to release it again there. So you have to manually do that. There isn't a retain release, because a retain release is you have the reference counting, and the actual allocation and the actual like cleanup is not handled by you. So when you first create, like in Objective-C, you'd do like ns, like some ns object equals the ns object alloc init. The alloc basically does the malloc stage. The init is the initializer. Alloc is just handled by Coco, and init is what you override. What you then do is that if you use alloc in it, that's already retained. So at some point you then have to release. Now at the point you co-release, doesn't necessarily mean that the memory will be fully like the allocated stuff there, but it generally is if the retain count is 0. Whereas if you did Objective C, object retain and then release, then that release call doesn't actually deallocate it because it's retain count 1, 2, and it's down to 1 and it's 6 rounds. So retain counting, as you know. Then you get things such as auto release, which that really doesn't happen then. That happens at some point in the future when an auto release pool gets cleared out. So it basically says release this at some point in the future. And this is useful for if you have a method where you want to allocate it, and it basically solves the problem where you're passing stuff up and you've got to, something has to release this, but you've got to know, okay, do I release this? So if I did like a NS object, create object, it just did that and it returned, well, if we get rid of that, it just returns the object. Let's zoom. Okay. So if you did that like this, and then I did NS object obj equals self create object, I then have to release that. Okay. So I then have to release that. Now there is a convention in Coco that you shouldn't need to do that. This is if you're using manual memory management in Objective-C. The only time you'd ever need to release an object from a method is if an alloc is in the method name or it said new object. And these conventions are important, and you should follow them if you do Coco, because automatic reference counting follows those conventions. Now, what you do in this case, actually, is you wouldn't release this, which would cause a memory leak, except you can do auto release. And what that does is it allocates it, so it's got a retain count of 1. It initializes it with all the initial properties, and then it adds it to the auto release pool. And what that basically means is at the end, usually the end of the run loop, because Objective-C there is, in Coco there is a run loop that keeps going on as your application is running, and events keep happening like at the end of the run loop and so on. So usually at the end of the run loop, it will clear the auto release pool. So this is just adding it to the pool. And any objects in the auto release pool will then get released. This does lead to complexities though. If I do release, I've released it then. Now, if I did, like, at this point, the release hasn't happened. If I call release here, it's going to release. And if I release here, I'm over-releasing, and you generally get a crash, some sort of error. And this happens on almost any retain release reference counting system, where it will release it. And it's already released, it's already been freed, so it will crash. The problem is, if I take that out, this code will still crash, but it won't crash at this point. It will crash at some point in the future when the auto release pool is done. The other issue with auto release pool is if you have a very tight loop and you're looping through creating lots of objects and releasing them, your memory is going to go up because that loop is keeping going through and the auto release pool is not being invoked. So it's at those times that you would do, I believe it's at auto release pool, which will actually, when you get to the end, when it gets to this point, it will actually do that. So if you had like a loop, like nested loops, so let's say you're going through just a 2D array, you'd have your outer loop where it's going through all the rows, and then the inner loop where you're going through the columns, and then you'd wrap the inner loop inside an auto release pool so that every time it finishes a row, it does an auto release and so on. So you can do that. Now, the thing is, most of that has become irrelevant because Apple introduced automatic reference counting, and basically the compiler now inserts the retains, it inserts the releases, it inserts the auto releases. Now, the other thing that's useful for the auto release is that if I do want to keep this around, so at this point, calling auto release, this method, the object that this method exists in, no longer has to care about this. As far as it's concerned, it is going to be released. It can't just call release because it wants to return it, but it is going to be released in the future. So if something else wants to keep it around, say in a property, they just call object retain on it. And now retain count is 2, the auto release takes it down to 1, so it still sticks around. So that's why auto release is useful. But the thing is, Objective-C no longer needs this because automatic reference counting, as I say, it automatically adds the retains, it automatically adds the releases, the compiler works it all out for you. And it adds far too many of these in, but then it goes through an optimization stage, optimization pass, where it takes them out and makes it as efficient as possible. And Swift uses that same automatic reference counting. And what's really cool is that applies to some of the C types to some degree. You've got to do a bit of wiggling and massaging, but some of Apple's C frameworks, I believe Core Foundation, don't have to do CF retain and CF release on there because automatic reference counting knows how to handle that framework. And this is one key thing about automatic reference counting, is that it's not dependent just on the language, it is dependent upon the framework to some degree. So this is why like naming conventions are important in Cocoa, because automatic reference counting relies on them. And when things don't match convention, you have to add all sorts of additional stuff in. So, but yeah, let's see. Not complicated, it's an extra step and an extra spot where you can make a typo and get it wrong. Yep, especially when you're using C, you don't want to do that. Great step forward when programming languages decide just to do that for you. Yep. And malloc is when you have a tiny computer with little RAM and sole CPU. Because sometimes you don't need the full object, you just need some bytes in RAM, and with malloc you can do that. Yeah, this is really where C... I mean, malloc isn't just in C, you can do malloc in other languages, but it's where this approach works is where things have to be as small and efficient as possible. But as Uli says, it's a lot more error prone. And the vast majority of people do not need that level of control, which is why so many languages do this for you. But it's still useful to know and have an understanding of, because it can affect optimization. Anyway, I am going to take a quick break just to refill my glass of water, but I will be back in 2 minutes when we will actually get some work done on the manual, because I need to take some screenshots. So I will see you all in 2 minutes. Okay, I am back. Let's get back into this. See, technically I think creating unsafe mutable row pointer in Swift is effective. Yeah, all the pointer stuff in Swift is so awkward, and I know part of that is on purpose because they want you to avoid using that where possible, but still it is so incredibly awkward. Though I do think one of the best things Swift has done is how it translates C APIs into Swift. I think that is pretty fantastic. I wish they'd do it for more things, because there's a lot of APIs that of their own that they haven't put all the annotations on to translate, but stuff like Grand Central Dispatch is so much nicer to use in Swift than it is in C, or C++ or Objective-C, because you can treat it almost object-oriented. Anyway, let's get on to building and running the app and taking these other screenshots. Because we have 1, 2, 3, we have that. Yeah, C is more explicit, it's designed for safety, but it's also the fact of part of the safety is making the whole thing that unwieldy that you try to avoid using it. Of course, the irony there with Swift is that then you have the Swift String API, which is so unwieldy that you usually just end up doing as NS string and using the old API. Right, let's take a screenshot of that. And what we want... no, I don't want to do that. Square over that. Circle over that. Polygon over that. Screenshot of that. Probably going to want to stick those in. So, here's Photoshop. Thought about using Swift to create your programming language, but eventually went to C++ because it's impossible to sensibly parse source code. What do you mean by that? You mean it's hard to write a parser for your compiler or interpreter? I'm pretty sure they're rewriting the Swift compiler using Swift. Oh, because you can't use NS string if you're not using Coke. Yeah. I mean, you can do a lot of stuff, it's just... It's one of those things where it is technically correct, but it's not practical. And it's one... I mean, the way I see it is that it's almost like the difference between mathematics and physics. Is that maths requires purity, but doesn't have to care about reality. Whereas physics is okay fudging numbers in order to get it to work with reality, because the real world does not care about mathematical purity. It just cares about what it wants. So it's why there are so many things that are fudged when it comes to the maths and physics, and things that are wrong but not, because that's how reality works. So string API is sort of the same, where it feels like it's mathematically correct, but it's practically not. So, yeah. But I mean, I'm thankfully I can always do as and a string, and at some point I am going to write an extension on the Swift string type that basically makes it so I don't have to do the as ns string. So I did discover it's easy. There is an easy way to convert a ns range into a Swift range, so that's good. Right. What do I want? Modify, expand. I heard that Swift Drive had been ported to Swift. Yeah, I think the driver has. I think they're looking at porting the front end. I mean, the back end isn't going to get ported to Swift because the Swift backend is LLVM, and that's C++, and that's staying C++. But I think the front end may go to Swift at some point, and it would be good if it did, because having at least part of your compiler be built in the language that it compiles makes a huge amount of sense, because it's a lot of dog fooding, and to be frank, compilers push languages a lot more than other things. Because the downside there is that it opens up an even greater risk of the language being developed by compiler engineers for compiler engineers. But yeah, if they had to use Swift to parse and manage Swift, it would certainly make life a lot easier for the rest of us mere mortals. for obvious. Uh, uh, Page page. Icon. Da. Hotspot. Oh. Hold icon. Cropping an image mode icon. Oh, I spent ages over the past few days updating some stuff on my Stream Deck. Page. I've updated a bunch of stuff for Affinity Designer. So I have all my stuff for streaming. Then I go across, I've got all my stuff for Xcode. A bunch of stuff for Photoshop, where I've still got to create icons, but for Affinity Designer, I've filled this out and created icons, and SF Symbols has been great here. So I can switch between all the personas using here. I can switch between all the different like display modes and zoom and stuff. And then up here I've got like a range. I can align stuff, change some fill settings, do all of the geometry things, do transforms and stuff. So I spent ages building all that up, creating all the icons, setting up the hotkeys so it can actually invoke all that. So I'm getting really into getting the Stream Deck doing exactly what I want. Though part of me is wondering whether I should switch away from using pages and instead have just a screen of folders for the apps, so that I go up to the root thing and then tap on an app and go down, but I'm not entirely sure. It's something I may play around with at some point. But yeah, it's got that doing. And actually I realised I only showed Sinister this. I've been doing some OBS scripting, and it's something for when I am muted. Oh, Uli, don't tempt me. I have been tempted. I keep thinking, oh, this would be so nice if I could have the XL. But then what would I do with this Stream Deck? Well, I'd keep it, of course. But yeah, so I've been doing some OBS scripting. And essentially, the issue was I'd keep muting and forget. So what I have is, if I mute briefly, because I'm just coughing or something like that, so let's say I'm clearing my throat, I can mute and unmute. Nothing has changed. You saw the little guy flash briefly while I was muted, but you didn't hear sound. But if I mute and leave it for 5 seconds, And there we go. So I have a script set up so that when I mute, there's a 5-second timer, and if it's still muted after 5 seconds, it now displays that icon to indicate that I'm muted. So for the times that I'm briefly muting, which is most of the time, just like cough or clear my throat or something like that, it won't show up. But it will eventually show up to give you a sign that I am muted, which most of the time is a mistake where I forgot to unmute myself, but it means that you are fully aware that I'm muted. So that was just a little something that I played around with, learning OBS scripting, learning Lua, so that was quite a lot of fun to play with. So what I want to do, can I get to load all of those? It's an OBS overlay, so it's not actually on the screen. Well, the thing is, having an obnoxious overlay would be a good reminder. But my Stream Deck already pulses, like when I'm muted, it pulses red. It's an animated GIF that just pulses on there. I've now got that up there so that I can see clearly on the thing, but when I'm looking at chat, I'll see there's a massive icon there. One thing I saw, like where I got some of the inspiration from the script, is so I actually wrote a script where they've got like a LED, like an enclosure that just contains an LED that they've stuck to the side of their monitor, and they were having it where it basically does the same thing as mine, except rather than showing something in here, it connects via, I believe it was WebSockets or something, to this LED, and it blinks this red LED when they're muted, which I thought was a cool idea, but I don't want to go quite that far. I mean, what I initially was doing was I was going to have my bot actually switch to this view where it's got a mute icon for a mouth, but I couldn't get that to work correctly and get it to sync up with OBS, so you should be able to set up to that. I know, sure, does it have... So you've got a bunch of stuff here that does smart home stuff. Lumia, Nanoleaf tiles, Philips Hue and so on. So there's stuff there. Well, this is the thing. I haven't got this set up in the Stream Deck. This is nothing to do with the Stream Deck. This is entirely in OBS. Because with the Stream Deck, you don't get the icon. If you do a multi-action or something, you don't get the icon. And if you mute anywhere else, it then doesn't do that. So what this is in OBS you can do tools, scripts, and they have a script there, and all it does is it takes an audio source and a muted source, and basically it lists Sorry, not properties. On update, I get a signal handler for the mute, and when I create it, I also look for scene changed, and they call this update muted. What this does is it looks for the audio source, gets the muted state. If I'm muted, then it will fire the toggle mute timer call after 5 seconds. Otherwise, it calls toggle mute straight away. All toggle mute timer does is remove the callback so the timer doesn't keep firing, and then call toggle mute. And all that does is find the source I want to display and either display it or hide it. So this is just basically like updating the state and then deciding when I actually update this. But the key thing here is, for example, if I mute myself by clicking in OBS, it will show up. So watch this. Now I did not touch my Stream Deck there. If I use anything on my Stream Deck, if I had automation elsewhere that does OBS, it will handle it. And this will work across basically any scene if I wanted it to. I'd have to do some tweaks. But basically, it is based off the state in OBS rather than something being invoked by Stream Deck or something. So I get to keep my icon on the Stream Deck and it's just muting there, but if anything else mutes it for some reason, it will actually display that icon up regardless. And you can like program in Lua or you can do Python, and it wasn't all that difficult. Right, so we want an image. Is going to be the image of an page called icon.peg. Size is about 24 px. That. Okay, so that is to open up. Oh. I know some people are like, oh, Apple Silicon isn't quite matching the latest Intel and AMD stuff, but the amount of heat they put out, it's... If you're in a nice air-conditioned room, fine, but if you're not in an air-conditioned room, i.e. you live in Europe, having a computer that doesn't... I mean, those are my current temperatures. So I'm on 90 odd degrees on the cores, 90 odd degrees on the GPU because it's encoding, 100 degrees up there. And it's fans going, yep, the fan is very audible. When you're putting out that much heat for a while, it's bad. And the thing is, I'm in a much better place now, because when I was in my old house, the room was smaller, there was no real airflow, so this is already an improvement, and it's still too warm in here. Oh, it's not a case of defending Apple, it's a case of there are other considerations than raw performance. I mean, if you are doing stuff like 3D graphics, then you probably want to go for the Nvidia stuff. But I mean, even there on the PC, it's a thing of Intel and Nvidia versus AMD. And AMD generally is more efficient and using less power. So when it comes to that, having AMD can give you maybe not as much power as the others, but it's that much more efficient that it becomes a thing. And it's not even as much the cost. I mean, with electricity prices and stuff going up, the cost matters. It's the heat. And it, like, to some degree, at least in summer, the amount of heat put out by the machine will probably be the biggest benefit for me of going to a Mac Studio than the performance. The performance is going to be ridiculous, but it's the lack of heat that it will put out compared to what I currently have that will probably be the biggest sort of physical, the biggest thing that I feel. More interested in Apple fixing whatever broke Spotlight for you. Yeah, I mean, Spotlight works for me, but the thing I'm interested in fixing is Notes, because ever since I did that last minute OS upgrade that failed and I've restored from a backup, the Notes app does not work for me on my iMac. I've deleted everything locally on my machine related to Notes. I have logged out and logged back into iCloud as many times as I think, and it's just broken. And I'm at the point where when the Mac Studio comes, it's going to be the first time in over a decade, probably the first time in 15 years, that I'm not going to use the migration assistant. I'm going to be completely fresh. The reason it's the first time in 15 years is the last time I did a complete fresh no migration assistant was when I moved from PowerPC to Intel. So I figure now is as good a time as any. New processor architecture, let's just do a fresh start again. Right, so we've got the image page done. Now, ooh, that's a fair point. Never took screenshots of the rotate icons. So, the Spotlight doesn't find certain apps or files anymore. Others work fine. Is that potentially the MD index process getting stuck, or maybe it's something like FS Events is not firing off certain things? Because I know you can force Spotlight to do a full re-index. So I'm assuming you've already tried that, so I wonder if something has messed up there. I mean, the thing that's been annoying me, and this is something that I only found out, when I go like this, like I can click on here now, this is fine. Let's see, if I bring that up, will that... Oh no, I can click now. Can I click on that? Yeah, can I click on that? Okay, so one of my displays is not actually letting me click, and usually it's my primary display, but It's actually my left display, so it's not as big a deal. But I do F11 and not be able to click on anything on the desktop. It won't select anything. And what I found out is it's this app causing it. SWB Audio app. I'm not sure it's the app's fault, because what someone pointed out to me is they said that they discovered this thing where you do show desktop and you can't click on icons on the desktop on one of your screens. But it turns out that for them it was some sort of status bar app that's causing it, and it was a different status bar app. Now that seems to me like there's maybe some bug that Apple has introduced in status bar items, maybe like with custom UI, like pop-over UI, something like that, that is messing with the Windows server or something and preventing you from being able to click on icons or something. But it is the most frustrating bug since upgrading to Monterey, and just finding out what the cause was amazing, because it's like, oh, I can just quit this app, and it doesn't help too much if I'm streaming, but in all other cases I can deal with it. Right. So there. That.
Welcome.
Right.
You've got mail.
Rotating and image. Right. Rotating image left. Load those. Right, let's write an article. So we're going to create a new topic. Click new topic. Title. Rotating an image. Automatically adds that. And what we're going to do is image. Image, page. Edit, rotate, left, right, clockwise, anti, counter. 2.1. And then content as pages. Have a reference. Okay. Okay. Oh, we do that, and then we want the dozens. left. Yeah, I need an ordered list anyway. Hi. Start editing. Okay. And then I want to start editing page. Click on left. That is going to rotate and page left dot JPEG. Not width. I don't want it. 33. I'm rotating. Yeah. Just copy paste that and change it to right. It may seem like this is a bit overkill, but having it separate means that it is a bit easier, because someone may want to know, how do I rotate this to the left? And it shows the actual buttons there. So that was a fairly simple page. So let's create. Right, so go here. We'll create a new topic. Cropping and image, edit, crop. I don't think there's any other tags that. Actually, let me just take this off. Get this on the screen. Okay, that then. Right. Summary. How to crop an image. Version 20. Page. Completely non. Go back and change your map later. Right, so we want us. No, we don't want to. Want details, which is going to contain a summary, which in turn is going to contain an ordered list, which in turn and a bunch of lists. Right, so what we want, add image. This one, wrapping image overview copy pack. Style equals 6 to 8, so 314. Right, so cropping and image, select editing. Image, not, hold icon. Style equal width 24, so that's what, 35, 36, 37. Not good. Probably one. Out. If you crop crop and that already is hotspots entirely in crop region not split. I had a similar bug a few years back where the menu bar would just disappear occasionally due to a status item. Now that code does a lot more freaky things than just arrange a few borderless windows in a row. Yeah, Apple has been messing around with the menu bar so much of late, and the menu bar's always been kind of a weird thing anyway, so hopefully they'll start fixing things. over time, bit by bit. Okay, so we've got cropping working. So we'll create that. Go back here. Add rotate. Crop pages. Okay. Do I know there's been any word about the kittens? No, I have not heard anything about the kittens. Let me take a quick look. No, I've not seen anything on Twitter either. I'd assume that they've picked them up Sinister, so... Yeah, another stream that Sinister and I watch, the Dog Swift stream, they've been counting down to getting kittens. So, they should hopefully have picked them up yesterday and be spending time with them over the weekend. And then we will find out about them on Monday, I would assume. So we will see what happens. I believe it's meant to be the Annie Morning Challenge on Monday. That was meant to be like several Mondays ago and several Mondays before that. So we'll see whether that sticks around when they've got kittens as well. Right, before we do anything, let's reorder these topics. So, we want editing an image to go up there, and we'll cropping go up there. Reorder. Yeah, it would not surprise me if it got delayed, but we'll see. I think Doig has more important things on his mind than streaming at the moment. His mind has been filled with kittens all week, so... Okay, this one may require quite a rethink. Create a link. Automatically find your links on page. Oh, check out the page title. Right, so that one can stay the same, so that's fine. Add an external link. Right, so there may need to be a section, or rather a topic in the linking section for adding a hotspot. Or possibly I'll rename this to be... Yeah, this is probably going to be creating a link on the text page and then creating a link on an image page. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to do a rethink of this. The external link, we can add an external link to a text page, add an external link to an image page. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to do an entirely new topic for image page. So what I'll probably do, I might try and get these other ones written up tomorrow off stream, and then on Mondays we will probably get working on updating the press kit, updating the sample document, and then possibly, because I was planning on releasing this week, but it's a bit close, a bit rushed, so I'll probably try see if we can get things finished for the end of Monday, because I will be doing a morning stream and an afternoon stream on Monday, and then for the rest of the week maybe we'll try playing around with UI testing and expanding the UI test suite, because that is something that I want to play around with, and it also is a lot more visual and a lot more interesting than unit testing. So we'll see if we can get that done, and then we'll probably aim to release, what would it be? Tomorrow's the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, so the 10th of May is probably when I would look at releasing, so I can build the app and get that sent out to a few people to play around with. See what people in like the press and so on think about it, so they can play around with it for a bit. But yeah, hopefully I can get the manual done. And one thing we will definitely do on stream is I want to show you how I build the manual, because if I go coppiceapp.com, so I've shown this before on stream, but we have the manual here, and if I bring up Coppice and bring up the help, you'll notice they are pretty much the same. And the reason they are the same is that this is pulled from my CMS database, but I have an API and a script that basically pulls this down, pulls all of the images and other content down as well and bundles it into the app. So this is local as well. And that is why, for example, there's a button here with an image. Why I have this syntax here rather than using image tags, because what it does is on the website I replace that with the URL and the image tag, but on here I have it where it points it locally to the image on disk. But in here I could search for text page, and you'll see I get all these results up here. But if I go to Coppice, oh, that's a fair point. Why is the favicon at? I was looking at, but if I search text page here, you see I get it searching up as well. Now it shows slightly different orders and stuff because it's using slightly different algorithms and stuff, but it shows pretty much the same thing in different orders. But you can then go through and okay. Well, that's a bug, so I will have to look into that. But on here you can click and go and see everything. So yes, that is what we will do on Monday. I'll try and get all this finished, ready for Monday, so the manual is all done. And then, yeah, hopefully get everything sorted out and be able to start again, get everything out the week after. What we'll probably do, I've said before, the week after Coppice is out, I want to take a break from Coppice, so we will probably stream some other stuff, possibly do Streamline, might spend a week or two just fully focused on Streamline before going back into Coppice, because if I can get that up to the point where I can start using it on stream, that would actually be quite good and useful. Get it to the point where people can start, like I can start sending it out to people to try out and so on. So yeah, we'll probably do that afterwards, but we're getting very, very close. It's been a long journey getting to this point, but we're very, very nearly at the point where Coppice is ready for its next release. So I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, a wonderful rest of your weekend. As always, happy coding.